good to have you here tonight. I'm Dan Reganold. Empower You is a series of free seminars if you've never been to one of our classes before to help you become more empowered in your lives. Just to teach you some things, help get you educated, learn about new things, to enjoy, have fun, and to get engaged in important topics like tonight's class on the CARES Act. This is Empower You's 19th semester of teaching over 400 classes to the public. For those of you who are new tonight, welcome. It's good to see such a huge crowd tonight, and we hope that you will join us for other classes of interest at empoweryouohio.org. So with the whole coronavirus thing, our studio in Springdale, Empower You Studio, has been closed. I just want to take a minute and say hi and thanks to the team. I miss you guys. Betty Overstreet, our great executive director, Jill Google, our operations manager, Bill Roll, our treasurer and popcorn maker, Joe Platt, our political director, and our great producer who's with us tonight, Jay Grunke. They've all been so helpful, and we've had to really postpone and move some of our classes. And I hope you'll kind of watch our classes that are coming up on empoweryouohio.org. I just wanted to tell you about a few of them. With our studio being closed, we're going to start a new program next week. It's called Empower You Chats. They're 1-hour conversations with important people. And our very first one will be next Thursday night. And that's with the West Side's own Pete Whitty. Pete's going to be talking about a subject I've been thinking about a lot, and that's the Millennial Hotel. He's a member of the Convention Facilities Authority, which he's on the board for. Pete and I are going to have a frank and open discussion about if this is something we want our governments to get involved in. When our governments are already struggling, can we afford to spend this much money when we're in the middle of a coronavirus on things like this? It'll be a great conversation next Thursday. Please join us. That's Pete's photo. And then after that, on April 16th, our resident expert on China, Al Tufarber, who's a professor emeritus of political science at the University of Cincinnati, will join us. Or as I guess the president would say, he's going to be talking about China. Oh my goodness, I'd say that this is a subject that's pretty timely. Don't miss Al. He's spoken about China with us before, and he's really got a lot to say. For those of you music fans, on April 24th, we'll have an incredible class on the genius of Neil Young. My friend and music guru, Dana Gore, will lead us through the incredible Neil Young's life. It'll be a great session. And finally, I want to tell you about a charitable initiative my company is involved in. Our company this week is partnering, and through the month of April, with the Council of Aging on a program to try to provide 7,500 boxes of personal care items to seniors that are impacted by the coronavirus. And this is in a 4-county area: Hamilton, Warren, Butler, and Clinton counties. If you like the session tonight, if you can go on fillthetruck.org, make a small donation as little as $1, it would surely be appreciated. We've got a lot of work to do. So I don't know if you're like me and at 2 o'clock you listen to the governor's press conference, but boy, that press conference hit me like a punch in the gut. I feel like we're all in this kind of together tonight. We're all in the same boat. I feel like you're like friends. I can feel you out there. You're like my brothers and sisters in this big mess that we're in. And our goal tonight, the Finney Law Firm's, my goal, Empower You's goal, is no matter what size company you've got, we want to try to get the best possible solution to help you in your business. So about the power of networking, Chris Finney and I have known each other for a long time. And over the weekend, we were talking about our businesses and how the corona thing had impacted us. And Chris sent me a blog post that he had written about the CARES Act. Before we knew it, we were talking about it. And his article that he wrote was the clearest thing I had seen yet on the coronavirus and on the CARES Act. And we decided we'd teach this class tonight, and that we would try to share what he knows mostly and his team. And I'm so appreciative of them for joining us. This effort with Chris and our collaboration tonight really should teach you about the power of connecting with people. And it's a message I want you to kind of remember tonight as we go through the class, that it's so important over the next few days that you connect with your friends and your family and your coworkers and your employees, especially when we're down, but believe me, we're not out. We can do this. So Chris is a licensed attorney in Ohio, Kentucky, and the District of Columbia, as well as a licensed Ohio real estate title insurance agent. In 1998, Chris was named the Lawyer of the Year. He's owner of the Finney Law Firm, where he concentrates in commercial and public interest law, as well as matters of real estate law. And he also owns a company by the name of Ivy Point Title. At the height of Chris's career, he reached the U.S. Supreme Court with 2 wins in June of 2014. What an incredible thing. He won back-to-back 9-0 decisions on cases in front of the Supreme Court. Rebecca Simpson Heimlich will also be joining us tonight. She has over 25 years of litigation and advocacy experience. After graduating from Vanderbilt School of Law, Rebecca began her career at Taft, Stetinus, and Hollister, continuing with Sanders and Dempsey, and also served as an assistant prosecutor in Claremont County. Stephen M. is one of Cincinnati's leading employment law attorneys, and he's also with the Finney Law Firm. He's going to address a lot of technical questions. And as several of you sent me questions over the last day or so that you wanted answered tonight, I've got them all printed out right here. We're going to get to as many as we can. Stephen, I'm sure, will be involved in answering a lot of those. So one clarification. At the bottom of your screen, if you take your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A section. That is where you can ask a live question anytime in tonight's presentation. The presentation from the Finney Law Firm will last probably 20, 25 minutes, and then we are going to take questions upon questions upon questions. Welcome, Empower You. Welcome, Chris Finney.
Thanks, Dan, and your friendship over the years is appreciated, and your leadership is appreciated. This program is very helpful, and I do want to encourage everybody on here. And Dan, you forgot to mention that you have a record crowd tonight for an Empower You session, and a record crowd for a virtual session. And it shows the great need that we have. But first of all, Dan funds Empower You, I think, mostly out of his pocket. And if anybody wants to donate to that, please go to empoweruohio.org and help Dan out. And then his Fill the Truck enterprise is just one of more of his charitable undertakings. And I'd like you all to try to support that as well. I want to say a few thanks tonight to Jane Schulte of my office for helping prepare all of this. She's our business manager, and Rebecca Simpson Heimlich, who's just done incredible amounts of work since Monday, researching and writing on this, and she's going to be presenting tonight. My paralegal, Emma Abrodsky, was also instrumental, and then Jake Brunke, who's helping put this program on tonight, is appreciated. On the topic, I'm going to just say very briefly that this is by far the most generous bailout package that I've ever seen. Back in 2008, when there was a series of bailout packages that came in, it was all for the Goldman Sachs and whatever, and the small businessman was left out. They've really tried, I think, to include everybody in this program. And what I mean by that is there's enhanced unemployment benefits. There is direct grants to small business. Well, there's direct loans, which are forgivable loans, as Rebecca will go through, to small businesses that are significant. May not be enough to bridge the gap that's about to come now that the crisis is going to go on to at least the end of May, but it's something. And then that you have this strange category of people that are 1099s and self-employeds. And it sounds like, even though the regs haven't come out, that they're going to be covered as well. So and then the direct checks that are coming from the government, certain tax benefits, and then certain employment law changes, which Steve's going to talk about, are in there. I have 2 amazing attorneys in my office that are going to be presenting tonight. Rebecca Simpson Heimlich, who's a public advocacy attorney and just the perfect person to have put this together. And then Steve M., who has a deep, long career as a employment law attorney that can talk about, for example, we had questions about, what if I have asthma and my employer wants me to show up for work? What do I do? What if my wife has asthma and I don't want to bring COVID home? My employer wants me to show up for work, and so on. So Steve's going to be prepared to talk about the intersection of employment law with the COVID crisis. What I want to warn everybody about is there's as many questions tonight as there are answers. And one of the things that we've talked about in our firm consistently, both as a firm and then in preparation for tonight, is that we want to proceed with integrity. So the information we're going to present is the best information we have, and the answers will be the best answers we can give. And unfortunately, in a lot of instances, those answers are, we don't know yet. The Small Business Administration is coming out with 200 pages of regs tomorrow, and right now the lenders don't even know what the rules are. And my understanding is that tomorrow they're going to rule out the rules for small businesses, and on the 10th, a week from Friday, they're going to roll out the rules for independent contractors and self-employed. But even then, I think there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of ambiguities. We have some warning signs about this program already. There was an article today in Inc. magazine saying the rollout's going to be chaotic. There's some indication that some banks are worried about their own liability and may refuse to participate. And the banks may have some inconsistent criteria for the amount of their loans or the qualification for the loan. It's not all clear at this point, and that's part of the point of this, is that Rebecca is going to be devoting the next month or two of her practice to helping people through this. And that's on a professional basis, but if you'd like our firm to help you with that, you can be in touch with Rebecca. It's Rebecca@FinneyLawFirm.com, or you can always email me at Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at Finney, F-I-N-N-E-Y, lawfirm.com. Our website, by the way, which is going to have continuing updates, maybe not as much as Rebecca's going to be handing out to individual clients, is FinneyLawFirm.com, and we're going to try to keep on top of this and provide current and updated information. And then finally, if you want to be added to our firm email list, Dan keeps the emails that he gets through Empower You confidential as part of his privacy policy, but you can email me directly, Chris@FinneyLawFirm.com, and we'll add you to our email list for our regular commercial law updates. Dan's got that slide, or Jay's got that slide there, Chris@FinneyLawFirm.com. So if you want to be on our mailing list, you need to ask for that. You will not automatically be added. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who is well prepared for this presentation. Has got a great PowerPoint to go through with you on that.
Perfect. Let me get the PowerPoint up. So like Chris mentioned and Dan mentioned, we're going to try to get through this pretty quickly. The PowerPoint's going to be a general overview because I've gotten emailed several questions. I know Dan has several questions, and I know that the most important thing for you guys is for us to get to those answers. So I'm not sure why there it goes. Okay. So first off, just a disclaimer, I'm sure you all know that, that this is a webinar. We're trying to give the information, as Chris said, to the best of our ability at this point. It's not intended to substitute as legal advice, but as Chris mentioned, if you want to give a call into our office, we are certainly happy to talk with you about questions that you may have and to help you through the process. So the topics that we're going to cover, I'm going to give an overview of the CARES Act. We're going to talk specifically about the grant and loan programs that were in the CARES Act for small businesses and self-employed. We're also going to talk about the expansion of unemployment benefits, tax relief to businesses, benefits to individuals, and then we're going to go through some frequently asked questions because I think that may answer some of the questions that folks have. And then I think Steve may talk a little about employment law, and then we'll get going on your questions. So as Chris mentioned, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, is one of the largest stimulus bailout packages, maybe the largest that has ever been passed. It was passed by Congress last Thursday. It was signed into law on Friday. It's $2 trillion. There are a lot of provisions. My next slide is going to show you where a lot of the money is going, but we're going to focus, as I mentioned, on really the benefits in there for small businesses and self-employed, and also assistance to individuals. So this is probably the best image that I've seen to explain where the money goes. So you can see that in addition to small businesses and loans and tax breaks and some of the things that we're going to talk about, there are specific monies going to particular industries, as well as including the airline industry, for example, as well as going to states and municipalities.
Rebecca, could I break in for just a minute?
Sure thing.
I just want to let everybody know, don't feel like you have to copy everything down. There's a copy of this PowerPoint presentation for you to download at empoweruohio.org tomorrow or whenever. Sorry.
No problem. So there are really two loan programs, one that can become a grant program that were, and I won't even say created in the CARES Act because they are both pre-existing Small Business Administration loan programs. What everyone is now calling the Paycheck Protection Program is an expansion of the SBA's 7A loan program. And then you're hearing probably a lot about the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And those were both in place, but the CARES Act has significantly changed, especially the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm just going to call PPP for short, and as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Programs. It's changed the qualifications and expanded the pool of eligible small businesses. So I'm going to start out because most of the questions that we've been getting this week have been about the PPP program. And so overall, and I'm not going to just read the slide to you, but the funding is $349 billion. And we're going to get to this in a minute when we talk about what you need to be doing now. As you can imagine, that is probably not going to be enough money for all the businesses that need help. So it's going to be important that you get going on this quickly. There will be no cost to apply. The purpose of it is to essentially fund payroll and workers, and so that people can maintain their employees. It's going to cover the 8-week period after you get your loan. The loans, there is going to be, and there's a lot of questions around this, and so we will delve into this. How much of it can be forgiven? What can be forgiven? You're not going to have to give a personal guarantee, and you don't have to show need. Now, these are the type of organizations that you see here on the pie chart that can apply. You must meet the size requirements of 500 employees or fewer, and the exception to that is the Small Business Administration has exceptions for certain industries. So in certain industries, you may be able to have more than 500 employees, but in general, it's 500 employees or fewer. So how much can you borrow? You've been hearing it's 2.5 times your monthly payroll. Well, the way that works is they're going to average out your monthly payroll, and you're going to be able to get a loan for 2 months of your payroll. And payroll is a defined term. It's not just what your payroll is now. There are certain things that are included and certain things that are excluded. And so they'll take your monthly payroll, then you can add 25% to that. And the reason they're doing that is because what it's going to cover is it's going to cover your payroll for 2 months. It will also cover mortgage interest, but not principal. It will cover rent, and it will cover utilities. Now, when this first came out, when the bill was passed, and what the bill says is those are the things that are covered. I will say that as we move forward, things are starting to change a little bit. On Tuesday, the Small Business Administration and the Treasury Department came out, and they said that they think that because so many people are going to request these loans, in order to be forgiven, you're probably going to need to use at least 75% of the funding for payroll, because that's the purpose. So I'm not going to read to you all the included cost. I mean, it is most of what your traditional payroll would be. The excluded costs, there's a cap on salary, so you can't pay anyone above $100,000. That doesn't mean if someone makes over $100,000, you can't pay them at all. It just means you're going to have to prorate it based on $100,000 a year. There is also, and I don't know if Steve's going to talk about this, is the Family First Corona Response Act, which allows credits for some wages, and to the extent that you can get credits for those wages, those will be excluded. If any of your employees have their primary residence outside of the U.S., that will be excluded. And our understanding now is that federal taxes and Social Security will not be included in there, though we will talk later, there are some tax breaks for those for a while. Now, the part that I want to highlight is under the included cost, the bottom bullet point, because we were getting a lot of questions about this. For a sole proprietor or independent contractor, here is, and this is a direct, under included costs, I just cut and pasted directly out of what the Treasury Department sent out on Tuesday. So the direction we have so far for sole proprietors and independent contractors is wages, commissions, income, or other net earnings from self-employment. The big question is, what does that mean? And, you know, we have ideas about what we think it should mean, but as Chris mentioned, the SBA is going to come out, they say they're going to come out tomorrow with their about 200-page document, their standard operating procedures, and that's going to help define a lot of that. So we've already started talking about how we're going to get the loan forgiven. And we've already talked about probably 75% of the loan is going to need to be used over that 8-week period for payroll. Some And we talked about the $100,000 cap. What we did not talk about is that you're going to have to maintain your employee compensation levels and your number of employees. And we can get more into that later if people have specific questions on that. But in general, you're going to have to maintain employee level and compensation levels. And what the Treasury Department is saying is that is for full-time employees. And so there's a lot of questions there too. What about part-time employees? What about people who are on commission? So again, hopefully that will be clarified tomorrow. So this is probably the most important slide when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program, which is you need to get started now. And here's why. Banks are saying that they're probably going to get more loan applications than they have ever gotten before. And so they may be overwhelmed. And not only that, as Chris mentioned, they're not getting the rules on how they're supposed to do this until tomorrow when it's supposed to start. So, and as they're saying, you may end up with different banks having different requirements or calculating things differently. But basically what you need to do is right now contact your bank. And there are, as you'll see on the list here, there are SBA approved banks, and all of those banks are already SBA approved. And so if one of those is your bank, then call there. But if not, you can call your bank first, because they're also going to approve some other banks to be lenders and see if your bank is approved. If your bank is not approved, you may want to consider going with one of the ones that is already, because it's going to be a race to apply and get the funds first before they run out. And the challenge is going to be that a lot of the banks, and what the banks are saying is, obviously the banks are going to help their customers first. So if you have a bank that's SBA approved, that's going to be very helpful. And for the ones that aren't, and they're going through the application process, if they're not there yet, then that may slow you down as well. So as Chris mentioned, the application start dates are April 3rd for small businesses and sole proprietorships, and April 10th for independent contractors and self-employed individuals. And as Chris mentioned, we anticipate that it is not going to go smoothly. Some of the banks are saying that, once we get this document, we have to figure out our policies, we have to train our folks. So you need to be patient with your bank, but get to them quickly so you'll get on the list. So you'll see on the right of the screen, there is an application. That is what they're calling the sample application at this point. It may change. Some people may have already filled out that application because it came out 2 or 3 days ago. Okay, I'm going to move on to the EIDL program. Now, unlike the PPP program, the EIDL program is mainly a loan program. The only exception to that is if you apply, and according to the SBA's website, if you have a successful application, within 3 days, they will send you $10,000. Now, there's been some question on whether that $10,000 then is a grant or whether you're going to have to pay it back. Some people are saying that if you eventually get a loan, it becomes part of your loan and you have to pay it back. Some people are saying, no, it's just completely a grant and you never have to pay it back. Again, I quoted off of the SBA's website, and they call it a loan advance that will not have to be repaid. And that's confusing, because if it's not going to have to be repaid, it's confusing why they would call it a loan advance. So again, hopefully there is some clarification on that. So this is a program that's been in place for a long time. So for example, when there was the tornado in Nashville recently, they declared that area a disaster area, and then small businesses in that area could apply for this loan. Same here. The president has declared all of the United States a disaster area, so small businesses across the country can apply for this loan. And what the CARES Act did was really just loosen up the requirements. Generally, you have to prove that you can't get a loan anywhere else, but you're not going to have to do that. It waived the requirements for personal guarantees up to $200,000, loosened the approval process. Now, in deciding if you want to do the EIDL or the PPP, the question is, hey, can I do both? And the answer is maybe. So you should be able to do both if you ask for different purposes. So for example, if you ask for, and you can only get payroll, mortgage interest, rent, and utility under the PPP. So you would need to ask for a loan for something else under the EIDL program. And So you can try to do both. In addition, some of the people that are going to benefit the most from the EIDL are people that don't, or companies that don't qualify for the PPP, either because they want to ask for a type of relief that's not payroll, mortgage interest, rent, or utilities, or you're just an entity that's not covered. So for example, rents are not covered under the PPP. So if you rent out homes and you want to be able to get a loan to cover, because your tenants are not paying now, you want to get a loan to cover that lost rent, then you can apply for under the EIDL. Also, nonprofits, under the PPP, only 501c3s and C19s qualify for the PPP. C19 is a veterans organization, but all private nonprofits will qualify, or they can apply for the EIDL. So then the question here is, how do you get started on the EIDL? And it is different than on the PPP. On the PPP, you're going to go directly through a bank. On the EIDL, you're going to go to the SBA's website and you're going to start the application process there. I have the link there. I know it's a lengthy link. I will tell you an easy way to find it. Just go to sba.gov, and at the top of the screen, you're going to see a large image that you can click on that talks about relief for small businesses because of coronavirus. If you click on that, it will take you to a page that explains these different programs. And when you see the EIDL, you can click there and it'll take you to the application. So that's how you get there. There's also tax relief under the CARES Act. We're just gonna go over this briefly. You can get up to 50% of wages, a payroll tax refund for up to 50% of wages for your employees. As I had mentioned, there's also some tax relief for folks who, and I think Steve may talk about this, so I'm not really going to, for folks who have to stay home to take care of someone. And then there's our employee retention tax credit. So a lot of businesses are in the situation where their businesses have been closed. And if so, and you suspended your operations, you can be eligible for delaying your federal taxes or your Social Security taxes. Okay, another big aspect of the CARES Act to help self-employed folks and independent contractors is the expansion of the unemployment insurance benefits. So normally, if you're self-employed or an independent contractor, you do not qualify to apply for unemployment. But the CARES Act has extended the eligibility so that now, under the CARES Act, you can apply as a self-employed or independent contractor for unemployment insurance, unemployment benefits. It also increased the funding, so you're going to get $600 a week over what the state would normally be paying you. So the big question here also is, how do I take advantage of that? So on the screen, you will see, again, a long link. And so I will explain to you how an easier way to get there. If you go to unemployment.ohio.gov, that's unemployment.ohio.gov, and you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see an image that talks about unemployment benefits and coronavirus, and you click on that and it will take you to this page that you see up on the screen. And I know it's tiny, but it essentially says, if you're an employer, click here. If you're been laid off, click here. And so I would be surprised if Ohio has all of this set up yet and it's going smoothly. In fact, I read that they're sort of backlogged at this point. There is also a phone number on there if you want to call. Okay, benefits to individuals. There are going to be direct payments. I know we've all heard about those. And if you look there, you will see what the adjusted gross income is and how much you will get. As we discussed, expands unemployment benefits. And another thing that the CARES Act did was, if you use retirement funds, you often have to pay a penalty for taking them out early. And they are loosening up those rules so that people can access their retirement funds. And also they have expanded tax benefits for charitable contributions, trying to encourage people to donate to charities. And that is true both for individuals and for companies. Companies can take advantage of that too. So we've gotten to the frequently asked questions. And I will say that the question that we are being asked the most is other than how do I get it forgiven, what counts as payroll? And it's a related question. So for example, people are asking, if I have commission-based employees, does the commission count? And what happens if the commission decreases? And if you look at the guidance that we have so far, absolutely commissions are listed, but how that is going to be calculated is not necessarily clear yet. Right now, what they're saying and calculating, you're gonna give your bank a lot of different documents, and they're gonna look at your payroll for the last 12 months, and they're gonna take an average of that. And the banks will tell you they don't know exactly how it's going to be calculated at this point, but they hope that tomorrow they're going to have that information. Independent contractors has been another question that we have gotten a lot, because the question is, say I'm an employer and I have independent contractors who work for me and I want to keep paying them and I want to get a loan under the PPP. Well, it's clear under the PPP that the independent contractors themselves can apply for a loan/grant. But what is not clear is if the employer who is engaging the independent contractor can. And what we're hearing is that probably not, which makes sense because you couldn't have both of them applying. So it's looking like it's just going to be the independent contractor. But again, we hope that's clarified tomorrow. And then the question, what about owners of companies? So I got one question where someone said, okay, so I have W-2 employees. I'm the owner of the company. I don't pay myself through a W-2. Does what I pay myself count? And it should. Part of what is included is net earnings from self-employment, or commissions, income, net income, earnings. As we discussed, though, the devil is in the details. What does that mean? So that is another thing that we hope will be covered in the SOP document that we hope will come out tomorrow. What exactly will be forgiven? I discussed that. We can discuss it more. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions about that. And so after 8 weeks, what if I need to lay off employees? And I will tell you that is a question that is not clear. I will tell you exactly what the Treasury Department has said so far about maintaining and I'm reading from what they have said. They said your loan forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease your full-time employee headcount. That's all they've said so far. On level of payroll, your loan forgiveness will also be reduced if you decrease salaries and wages by more than 25% for any employee that made less than $100,000 annualized in 2019. On rehiring, they say you have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made between February 15 and April 26. And, as you can tell, that's not necessarily clear because this program is starting, you can start applying this Friday, tomorrow, and the deadline for applying is June 30th. So you may not even have your loan by April 26th. So there definitely needs to be some clarification on that. And I know there's a lot of questions around that. What if the funds for PPP run out? I mean, who knows? What we're hearing is that, there are those in DC who say that if it runs out, they want to go in and appropriate some more money. But, as you know, I'm sure you guys all know enough about politics to know that we don't know if that's going to happen. So as I said, from my perspective, the most important thing is that you just get on it now and call your banker now. All right, so I just wanted to go to this slide again and say thank you to Empower You. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate tonight. And I think, Chris, am I going to turn it back to you now?
I think actually Dan is getting the questions. He's going to give us those, and then I'll decide if that goes to you or Steve, or if maybe I know a little bit of something to help out on that.
And Stephen, would you start off and just tell everybody about the poster that we've put on the website, empoweruohio.org, that you wanted to let people know about, and just anything else you wanted to go over?
Sure, absolutely, and welcome everyone. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act made some important changes to federal employment law. Specifically, it made some amendments to a federal act called the Family Medical Leave Act, or the FMLA. As many of you may know, the FMLA allows for employees to take leave from work for up to 12 weeks a year for serious health conditions, or to care for a family member with a serious health condition, or as a result of a pregnancy or maternity leave. And so what the Coronavirus Response Act did was basically add coronavirus related reasons to the Family and Medical Leave Act. But it did so in some really important ways. First of all, many of you may know that the FMLA, as previously written, had some very severe limitations. First of all, it only applied to larger employers. You had to have 50 or more employees in order to be covered by the FMLA. Also, the leave provided for by the FMLA was unpaid leave. You didn't have to pay the employee while he or she was on leave. And lastly, only certain employees were eligible to take leave under the Act. You had to be employed with your employer for at least a year before you'd be entitled to take that any FMLA leave. Now, what the new law has done is changed each of those three things if leave is needed for reasons related to COVID-19 or because of COVID-19. First of all, it applies to smaller employers. The 50 employee requirement for employers was eliminated. So now even the smallest employer is going to be required to provide leave for COVID-19 related reasons. Also, it applies to almost all employees. Remember, I said you had to be employed for at least a year with your employer in order to be subject to the FMLA or be entitled to take leave under the FMLA. Under the Coronavirus Response Act, that is no longer the case. There's no longer a year requirement. You can be employed for just one day and you'll be entitled to take leave for COVID-19 related reasons. Thirdly, and perhaps most significantly, is that the leave that is provided for and that employees are legally entitled to take under the FFCRA is to an extent paid leave. So now employers are supposed to receive 100% payroll tax credits to pay for the paid leave that they're required to give under the Act, but this is a new thing. So there are essentially 6 events that will allow an employee to take leave under this expanded FMLA. 6 triggering events, if you will. And if the employee is covered by one of those 6 triggering events, for instance, if you're quarantined because of a state shelter-in-place order, if you have symptoms of coronavirus and you are seeking a medical diagnosis, if you have to care for a child who is at home because their school or their daycare has been closed. All of these things, if because of one of those events, you as an employee can't work or telework, then in that event, you're entitled to take leave of up to 12 weeks in a calendar year in any 12-month period for those reasons.
And those are all listed on the poster that people can download on empoweruohio.org, right, Stephen?
That's exactly right. If you go to empoweruohio.org, you'll see a link to a poster that's been published by the U.S. Department of Labor. And all employers subject to the Act, which at this point is nearly all employers.
Let's jump into some questions if we can. And
sure.
Dan, can I interject real briefly? I just want to make sure people know that they may have to move the mouse to the bottom of the screen in order to see the Q&A button. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start off with some questions. Here's the first question. Can you use loan money for rent if you are renting from a related party? This is from Shirley. Example, the company wanting the SBA loan is renting from an LLC owned by the same person that owns the business.
This is Chris Finney. I've not seen any prohibition on that just yet. And I think that one of the things that bathes this act is that they seem to want to give out the money liberally and apply the rules liberally. Now, with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca to see if she's got any different interpretation of that.
No, I don't. The rule that they have said with respect to rent is that the lease agreement had to be in place by February 15th of this year. They also there are some affiliation rules, and they are looking at those affiliated companies and determining if you have 500 employees or less. And it also would determine if the two related companies could both apply for the PPP, but they've loosened those up somewhat. It generally has to do with, do the same people control both companies? So you would need to look at both the affiliation rules, but assuming the lease was in place on February 15th and you don't have an issue with the affiliation rules, there shouldn't be an issue.
Rebecca, Jerry asked a question. I completed an application on the Ohio website. What's the difference?
On the SBA website, I assume that he means. On the SBA website, they've had a link up for a few days now that says if you put your application in here, we will connect you to, an SBA approved lender. I don't know how quickly. I would actually recommend, if you have a relationship with a bank, that you go directly to your bank and instead of going through the SBA website, because it's actually the bank that is going to give the loan rather than the SBA. But at this point, if you've already done that, you may want to call your bank after tomorrow, because that may be covered in that 200-page document, the question. But yeah, they're supposed to be hooking you up with the bank.
Rebecca, Jim asked almost the exact same question. He said, we submitted an application electronically. We were given an application number, but when we called the SBA this morning, they said the process had changed and we could no longer use this. So his question was, can we just file another application with the bank? Is that what you'd recommend? I would go to the bank and I would tell them what happened and try to file an application with the bank. And if the SBA is saying that that doesn't work anymore, and my assumption, honestly, I'd never gone to the SBA website, to the approved SBA lender page before Friday or Sunday. My guess is that may have been up there, and that's always up there because the 7A loan is an existing loan. So it may just be that now, because the way this is working, you're going through banks, they're going to make you, and I think they are going to make you go directly to banks. And Tom asked a question, what's the tax year for income levels? It's last year, 2019, right? The tax year for income levels, they're going to look at what they said is they're going to look at the last 12 months, starting February 15th and looking backward 12 months. I will tell you that banks are telling people that they want to see the payroll for both 2019 and 2020. Now, if you're a seasonal employer, that's going to change somewhat. What about, does a single member LLC qualify as a sole proprietor or a self-employed? That's from Bill. It will qualify for one or the other. It doesn't, and I don't know how the banks are going to, determine that. I would guess a sole proprietor, but it's not going to matter because they both qualify, and then the bank will figure out how they want to determine. So it doesn't matter. So one of the kind of overlapping questions that I've seen several times is this area of employees kind of filing for unemployment at the same time these grants are coming. So Tyler asked the question, if you're applying for PPL or EIDL, are you still, or are your employees still eligible to apply for unemployment as a self-employed worker? Chris, I'm taking all of them. You want to take some? I mean, I'm happy to take it.
I'll say a couple things on that. First of all, on the issue of unemployment and PPP, and on the issue of self-employed or 1099 employee in PPP, what they're telling us, what I read between the lines, is that everybody's going to be covered. There's going to be relief for everybody, but I think they're trying to avoid overlaps, which is the problem. So for example, if a real estate company has licensed realtors who are self-employed or 1099, does the real estate company get the money, or does the realtor apply directly through unemployment or through PPP themselves? And then some realtors, for example, have subcontractors or their own employees on a team. They can't collect twice. Now, in terms of unemployment versus PPP, Dan, it doesn't make any sense to me, the question, because the point of PPP is to have the employer call the employees back. So nobody's supposed to be unemployed. So what I think is happening is Congress is freaking out with these huge unemployment application numbers, 3 million last week, 6 million this week, and they want to get those numbers down. Well, the PPP says to an employer like you or another small business, we're going to give you all this money, but the condition of you getting that money forgiven is you have to call these employees back and put them to work. Well, let's just say for a restaurant that doesn't have carryout, you can't put them to work, right? There's no place, they're not allowed to
Right
work.
now.
You would still pay them. So they would get their money through the restaurant, just like an unemployment check for doing nothing, or maybe just odd jobs for the restaurant owner. But at least they're put back to work and off the unemployment line. But there would be no reason to me that somebody would get both PPP and unemployment. You get paid through one or the other. Do you agree with that, Rebecca?
I do, absolutely.
Now, what about PPP really has nothing to do, William asked the question about individuals getting the $600 from the federal government, right?
Yeah, in reality, some people are going to get, a windfall, not a huge one, but there are people who will stay employed or get full unemployment and get the $1,200 check. So I think they're completely independent. These are just ways of pushing money out to stimulate the economy, and there's going to be some winners in that and some big winners in that.
Diane wanted to know, this is an interesting question. What if you're an independent contractor, but you've been on the job for less than 12 months? Let's say you've been driving for Uber for 6 months. Do they just take the 6 months, or what do they do?
First of all, we don't know what the rules are going to be for 1099s and unemployed, self-employed, but what they've said that I've read is that they're going to take the average of the last 12 months. So the same question would apply. What if somebody got a big raise in the middle of last year? Or what if somebody started an employer hired 5 new people last year? Well, he's only going to get the average of the last 12 months. And again, for some people, that's going to be a windfall. Maybe he laid off, maybe he doesn't have as many employees, or maybe he's going to get more that he's entitled to, maybe less. But that, I believe, is the program. It's the average of the last 12 months of employment. And I'm guessing that's going to follow through on the self-employed and 1099 as well.
Paul had a question. He formed an LLC with an S Corp election. He pays himself a combo of W-2 salary and profit distributions. Is it your view that both will be considered as part of payroll costs up to the 100,000 limitation?
That's an excellent question, and one we will find out when the regs come out. You're paid part by W-2, part by distribution of profits or 1099. And I think that the way the law is written is they're trying to take care of both 1099 and W-2, so you should be able to get both up to the $100,000 limit.
Greg had a question. With such a high demand for PPP, will it be possible all the $350 billion for this program will be quickly depleted? I think your clear answer is time is of the essence.
Well, not everybody can win, not everybody can apply. And one of the seminars we heard this week, they said, if you don't need the money, you may not want to apply and make sure that somebody who really needs it gets it. What I've seen is that the real need is going to be somewhere between 2 and 2.5 trillion to properly fund PPP, which means it's only been funded at about 20 to 25% of the amount that it needs. So they're going to run out of money. So without a supplemental appropriation, somebody's going to be left holding the bag. And you may want to think about that, just as Dan talked about at the beginning of the seminar. This is all about our neighbors and friends, and there may be people that want to leave this money for the businesses that really are going to need it to stay in business versus one that does not.
Here's an interesting question from David. I have a small film production company with 2 partners, 51%, 49%, and we have some 1099s. The 2 partners take draws based on the money coming in. During this crisis, few companies will allow us to film in their facilities, so there's no money for the 2 partners to draw from. Is there any help for us financially?
Rebecca, do you want to handle that?
Well, I think the answer is similar, Chris, to what you explained before, which is we don't know exactly till the regs come out, but the way it should work is that you take the average of their 1099 income over the last 12 months, and that is what they would be eligible for.
I think this was more the question that I tried to get to before, Rebecca. Let's say we take the loan based on 50 employees, the PPP loan, and
Yes.
a few people choose to file for unemployment. That would be something like that would be going on in our company. They choose to file unemployment instead without telling us. Do we still qualify for the loan based on that number of employees remaining?
So the question is really a question of forgiveness. Yeah, because they're going to look at your payroll over the last 12 months, and you're going to have that maintained, the level of payroll and the level of employees by the end of the period. I read that just a minute ago, just a second. You have until June 30th to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. So that's the only direction we have so far. And if you took that literally, that would mean if you have employees that you've gotten the loan funds for, if you want to have them forgiven, you're going to have to hire more employees and maintain the same level of payroll and the same number of employees. Hopefully there'll be more clarification on that, but right now, if you're going to take it literally, that's what it means.
I'm filing for the loan tomorrow. What is your recommendation? Do we tell employees not to file for unemployment?
Well, if you're going to keep them on payroll, if you want to take the chance that you'll get the loan and the forgiveness, you're going to keep them on payroll, yes. But if they're unemployed, they need to provide for themselves. I think the point of this program, again, if you think about it, Congress doesn't want to see these huge numbers on the unemployment line. So they're providing money to the employers to bring those employees back and take them off the unemployment rolls. Now, the timing of that is, you know, if they can wait, if you can pay them for 2 more weeks, or if they can wait 2 weeks, fine. But otherwise, they need to provide for their families.
Kim asked the question, what is the best thing available to an independent hairstylist? What should I do?
That's a great question. I actually own a hair salon of all things. Dan is one of my investments, and I have 4 stylists down there, and they were all, you know, thrown out of work because of the order to close them. And as far as I'm concerned, they're all self-employed, 1099 or self-employed, and they're going to be covered. And we're going to know that next Friday, the 10th, of exactly how that's going to happen. It's either going to be by applying for the PPP and getting it forgiven, or it'll be something that that they get through the unemployment system.
Geraldine asked an interesting question. We opened our business on December 12th, 2019. How will this affect the overall average of our payroll? We were shut down after just operating for 3 months. What do we do?
I think they're only going to get 1/4 of the amount that somebody else would that had been in business for the whole year. Do you agree with that, Rebecca?
I have not seen an answer to that question. That's the first time I've heard it. I mean, because the question is the average, and since they don't have 12 months to look at, the question is, because it's an average monthly, so you could do an average monthly with 3 months. The question is, will they do that?
I had an anonymous attendee ask a question. Hello, thank you for the webinar, Finney Law Firm. Where can the PPP application be found and available to be submitted? Thank you.
Through your bank.
Here's another question from another anonymous attendee. Can 100% owner opt to not receive a salary without affecting the forgiveness?
Chris, you want me to take that, or you want to take that? Did we lose Chris?
I'm sorry, my sound blanked out. So Rebecca, take that question. My sound blanked out.
Sure. And the answer would have to do with whether that owner normally takes salary. Because if the owner normally takes salary and it's included in the 12 months average, then they're going to get a loan that includes their salary. And so in order to get forgiveness of that loan, they're going to need to pay that same level of compensation.
Josh asked the following question.
Oh, I was going to say, I understand the question though, because the point is, if I can use my money, you know, to put back in my business as opposed to paying myself. So maybe there will be some sort of guidance on that comes out, because that is a situation that I'm assuming a lot of business owners will be facing.
Josh asked this question. I'm a partner of a 10-year-old LLC. The partners are paid via a draw system. We have always paid our self-employment taxes, but we don't pay unemployment insurance. Is there any financial aid available for us?
You know, the weird thing about this is for the 1099s and self-employeds, I think historically they don't pay unemployment insurance. But what they're saying is the unemployment system is going to cover them. So it's kind of an anomaly or an incongruity, but people who've never obtained unemployment insurance and never paid for it, I think may be getting the payments through the state unemployment systems. I heard Donald Trump on TV maybe last Monday, talking about this. And he said he wanted to administer it through the federal programs, but the states, the Democrats insisted on putting it through the state programs, which means the unemployment system. So I think it's a bit of a mystery of how they're going to process people who don't actually have insurance to pay them unemployment insurance, but that appears to be what's happening.
Kim asked the following question. Also, for the checks we're getting, will college students get any funds? If we can claim as full-time students and they are over 17, are they included in the employment count?
The checks that college kids are getting, what kind of checks?
I'm assuming if the PPP, there's no reason somebody over 17 wouldn't be counted in the count, is there?
Oh, no, I mean, a full-time employee is a full-time employee. I don't think it makes any difference.
I work for an essential company. Can they request us to give them a medical note to receive the paid leave? That might be a question for Stephen.
Sounds like it.
I work for an essential company, Stephen. Can they request us to give them a medical note to receive the paid leave?
Yes, they can. You are, as an employer, you are entitled to ask certain questions of employees and get certain information from employees to verify the need for leave. Now, at the initial stage of requesting leave, the employee is only required to provide basic information: who your healthcare provider is, what the reason for the need, what the reason is for the need for leave. You have to trust the employee at the initial stage, but later you can request verification that they actually needed the leave.
Stephen, this whole subject of people testing positive is a difficult area. As an employer, if you find out that someone in your organization tests positive, that's assuming we ever go back to work. What are you allowed to? What do you say, if anything? What's your recommendation on that?
If they've tested positive for this virus,
yes,
the coronavirus, you can require that they stay away, and you can require that they provide proof that they're free of the virus before you allow them to come back to work.
And what about what do you tell people? Do you tell people anything? What's your obligation to tell employees?
To tell your other employees or the affected employee? You as an employer you cannot share health information about one of your employees with other employees. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, has an employee confidentiality provision, and employers are required to maintain medical information about their employees in the strictest confidence and keep them in separate files, separate from their regular employee files, with only certain designated people having access to that information. So you can tell your employees that John or Joan is not working here, they're not well, but you can't give them any information about a medical diagnosis or treatment.
Thank you. And this is up on the screen, the image of the poster that you can download on empoweryouohio.org. We've got a ton of questions. Let's keep firing at them. Ken asks, I have an LLC business. I'm a sole proprietor with no employees. Do I apply tomorrow or the 10th? It's not clear to me.
Rebecca?
Yeah, just a second. I want to make sure that I'm getting that right. I'm pulling out the document from the Treasury.
While you're looking at that, Rebecca, let me just tell people that for you employers out there, that poster that was just up on the screen, I would urge you to access that and post that immediately. This law went into effect so quickly that the date by which you were legally required to have that posted in a conspicuous place in your work space was yesterday. So I guarantee you 99.5% of American workers do not have that up yet, but legally is required. So do download it and do put it up in a conspicuous place.
That was one of those essential things, huh, Stephen?
Yes.
I'll fire another one, Rebecca, while you're waiting there.
Oh no, I have it. So as far as a sole proprietor, small businesses and sole proprietors can apply starting tomorrow. It is independent contractors and self-employed individuals that have to wait till the 10th.
Okay, here's an interesting question from Kelly. We own a booth rental salon. We will qualify for a grant for the loss of booth rent. We have under 10 booth rentals. Do we qualify for EIDL if we are not collecting rent from a booth rental salon?
Chris, you want to take that one or do you want me to? I don't know if he can hear us. As an owner of a salon, I thought he might want to take that one. He can't hear us. All right, so we have looked at the question of if you are a landlord and you're receiving rent, then you should be able to get relief under the EIDL. And it's analogous. Hopefully it will be the same. But yeah, I would direct them to the EIDL, the website. They apply there online.
Heather asks, as a sole proprietor, can I apply for PPP if I've also applied for unemployment?
That's a good question. And, you know, Chris gave a good discussion of the purpose of the PPP and the unemployment. So my guess is the answer to that is going to be no. You're not going to be able to. I'm hoping that will be clarified tomorrow, but just for policy purposes, it wouldn't make sense that you would be able to get your salary under PPP as well as get unemployment. So you may want to make a decision, which way am I going to get more money, you know?
Stephen Eric says, are the FMLA changes you talked about permanent?
No. They only apply for the period from April 1st through December 31, 2020. That could change depending on what happens with the virus, but right now they are scheduled to expire at the end of the year.
Rebecca, I want to make sure I heard this one right. I think you've answered this. If I'm an independent contractor, should I apply tomorrow or wait till April 10th?
For independent contractors, you have to wait till April 10th.
Thank you.
And I want to apologize for my sound going in and out, but my battery's going dead, and I don't think I'm going to be able to continue on the call here. I'm trying, but if I jump out, you guys just finish it for me.
We'll carry the weight, and let's thank you if we lose you.
And thanks everybody, did a great job, but I'm just I'm losing battery. So.
Jamie asks, what are the specific utilities that qualify for the use of funds? Specifically curious about Wi-Fi.
It's a good question. And there hasn't been any guidance so far about what utilities will count. It just says utilities. So because the banks are going to be analyzing that, as you turn in your information, the banks will advise you on how much of a loan you can get. So it would make sense that that would be part of the guidance that they would get tomorrow in the SOP. So hopefully it will be there, but so far there's not any.
This is a great question from Nicole. On the PPP plan, can employer health care plans be paid with these funds?
Yes. So I had a slide on that. I'm going to pull up. I have it here as well. What they have said, and the reason I keep pulling the document is because the only direction that we have right now is what the Treasury Department put out on Tuesday, and I want to rely on that because some of what they said has been a little bit different than what was in the statute. They say employee benefits, including costs for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave. And it says payments required for the provision of group healthcare benefits, including insurance premiums.
I think this is just a clarification question from Mark. Do we apply for the PPP via the SBA website or through our local banks? It's confusing. Most banks are telling me that they're not taking applications any way other than online, and not until tomorrow, worried that the money will run out.
Those are two concerns. I mean, the concerns are, I've not heard that you had to do it online. That would depend on the particular bank and what kind of portal they have set up and how they want to do it. But definitely for the PPP, you have to go through a bank. The banks are administering that program and the loans will come from the banks. On the EIDL, that's the one where you go to the SBA website and apply there. Those loans will be coming from the SBA.
So the PPP through the bank, the EIDL through the SBA.
Yes.
And I know we've been talking, we work with Fifth Third, and Fifth Third had us fill out kind of an online document, but then they came out and they said today that they're going to require a Fifth Third document tomorrow also.
Yes.
So it's like every day there's like another layer that gets added to this this complicated bill. Paul says, I formed an LLC with an S Corp election. I pay myself a combo of W-2 and profit. Well, we already took that question. Thank you. We have two separate retail service companies, a dog grooming salon and a tanning salon, says Jeff, that are closed due to COVID-19. The businesses are a partnership LLC. Employees are paid through a payroll company, but the owners do receive a weekly paycheck. They just realize the profits at the end of the year. are the LLC owners eligible for average pay for the 8-week payroll protection program? How would this be verified?
So what they're going to do is they're going to look at the average payroll over the last 12 months. And that's going to include if they're paying themselves with a W-2, the owners, it's pretty clear that that will be included. If they are just paying themselves a portion of the profits too, that may be included as well. The challenge is that that is going to include the level of employees that they no longer have. And so the question is, once they get the loan, are they going to be able to get forgiveness of the loan because they have to have the same level of employees that they had at a prior date, likely before they had to lay those folks off. And so as Chris was discussing, when it comes to the policy and why Congress did this, I mean, the goal is to be able to continue paying employees so that they can put money back into the economy, even if those employees aren't working, or maybe you can make them do, something, but the goal is to get the employees paid.
I think one of the kind of overriding concerns business owners have is this issue of taking the PPP, which sounds pretty good, bringing people back, but even after this newest postponement, getting in a situation where businesses don't jumpstart, being on the hook for this money and having to let people go and being on the hook for this money that you've been given. Do you have any sense on how that's going to play out? Or
that is one of the big questions that a lot of people are asking. And I completely understand the concern. I was on a webinar with some other attorneys yesterday, and their answer was, let's pray that doesn't happen. So, it's not that there's a clear answer. So it is clear that what they're saying at this point is that you have until June 30th to restore your full-time and salary levels. So you'll have some time, but absolutely that's a risk. And as Chris mentioned, it seems like they want to give the funds and it seems like they want to forgive the funds. So hopefully that will loosen up somewhat, but so far that's all they've said.
at what point are the funds forgiven?
So what happens is when you get the loan is going to cover the next 8 weeks of your payroll and then also your mortgage interest or rent or utilities, which should only be about 25% of what you spend. After that, you're going to apply to your bank for loan forgiveness. And the bank has 60 days to tell you whether or not your loan will be forgiven. And one thing that we haven't talked about is how are you going to be able to show where these funds went? So one of the ways that people have been recommending and makes sense is to open a completely separate account when you get the funds and put the funds in the completely separate account and then keep records of every time you spend out of that account. So there will be a very clear trail.
Good idea. I like that.
Yeah. Of how you
write that one down because it'll be tough trying to reconcile that 6 months from now. Here's a question from Rich. I'm self-employed with no employees and pay rent on a commercial property location. Am I eligible for rent assistance?
Under the PPP, he would be eligible both to get payroll for him. And I say that with air quotes because it's going to have to be defined what that means. And he can get rent assistance under the PPP. But as the Treasury Department said when they came out on Tuesday, they anticipate you're only going to get the amount forgiven if 75% of your loan went to payroll and only 25 went to utilities or rent or mortgage interest.
This is from Shirley. Can a business with no payroll costs only using independent contractors qualify for any SBA loans?
And that's one of the questions. That was one of our frequently asked questions, and I probably worded it a little bit differently. But one of the big questions is if you're an employer or if you are a company and you run your company through independent contractors, can you apply for the PPP? It is clear under the PPP that if you are an independent contractor yourself, you can apply. The question is, can the company that hires you also apply? And what we're hearing is that the answer to that is probably not. And the reason that makes sense is because you would have this two people applying essentially for the same funds for the same person. So that's, I think, what people are thinking, but also thinking that hopefully that will be clarified as well.
Hey, Bob says, are wages to a part-time employee eligible for PPP?
Yes. So in calculating, they look at all full-time, part-time employees. And so they do look at your payroll. So the part-time employees should be included. The only caveat there is when they're looking at for forgiveness, in the level of employees, they only refer to full-time employees. But I've not seen anyone say, yeah, you should be able to get, that should count as your payroll when they look at your 12 months of payroll for over the last.
Now, what about overtime compensation for a normal work week? Is overtime calculated as part of the PPP, or is it just 40 hours a week?
And I would say that things that granular at this point, we don't have answers to. And that's one of the things I heard a bank talking yesterday, or someone from a bank who was saying, normally in our course of business and making loans, we don't calculate payroll. So it's not something we're used to doing. It's not something we know how to do. And so that's why we really can't talk about how we're going to do it until they give us this 200-page document. And so specifically what's going to be included is yet to be determined. We also anticipate that even once we get the 200-page document, that it probably will not address every situation. So we're going to continue getting answers as we go. I will tell you that under what generally they have said, which is that they just look at the 12 months, that if it's included in payroll, then yeah, it should be included.
So payroll's payroll. That's probably the easiest way to
well,
look at it.
Yes and no, because payroll is a defined term. And there was a slide that I showed that it said in calculating payroll, there are included costs and there are excluded costs. And the included costs are the things that you would generally assume were included, but the excluded costs were things like if you have employees who live primarily outside the US, federal taxes and Social Security at this point, we believe are not going to be included. If you're getting a credit, otherwise, because under one of the, I forget the name of the Family Act, there are certain things. We can pull that slide back up and show it if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay. Let me see.
And while you're doing that, I'll ask Chris Finney before he bows off. This $100,000 rule, Chris, are employees up to 100,000? Is the 100,000 counted, or if somebody makes over 100,000, are they out?
Can you hear me, Dan?
Yeah.
Do you want me? My understanding is you're in up to 100,000. So if you have a 200,000 or 300,000 or 150,000 employee, you can get the reimbursement, but up to the limit of the 100,000 and no more.
Okay, Kurt wants to know, he's a real estate agent with 2 employees. One is older and has decided to furlough himself because of the virus. The other's working 30 or so hours. I pay myself a salary at the end of the month. What should or could I do? I'm incorporated.
He pays himself a salary at the end of each month, meaning he's a W-2 employee. So when he applies for the PPP, he and the 2 employees would be included in the amount of the loan. But since he now only has, so he have a total of 3 people. But when he applies for the forgiveness, because he's now, his payroll is reduced by 1/3 or by 25%, the forgiveness would be reduced by 25%.
Had a similar question from Craig. One of his partners retired on 3/31. The partner had the largest salary in the firm. We also had a higher ranking employee leave a few weeks ago, and we are not going to replace that position in the near future. We're a small company, 18 employees. So these are considerable changes to our payroll moving forward. How do these salaries not being included in our 8 weeks after loan data affect what's forgiven and what's considered a loan?
Well, so again, if you think about it, what the government wants to do is to pay you for the people you're keeping. So if people quit, can't work because of the COVID risk, they've retired, but just say you've reduced your workforce by 20%, you can borrow the average weekly salary of the last year. But the loan forgiveness is going to be reduced by the amount your payroll is reduced. So if your payroll is reduced by 20%, that's actually a good thing, right? Because you have less expenses, but your loan forgiveness will be that same proportion.
So I had somebody say that they own multiple businesses. Which business should I use to apply? Can you add that? Can you add like owned businesses together, even if I take guaranteed payments or payroll from different companies?
My understanding is you can apply for each of the companies. So if you took $20,000 of salary from 4 different companies, those 4 companies would get the $20,000 each. Do you disagree with that, Rebecca?
I do not disagree with that.
What about
That's at least what we're hearing now. I mean, I don't know what it's going to shake out.
Is there any relief at all for businesses with more than 500 employees? I know we're talking everything under, but that's just a question someone had.
What I have seen is that there are exceptions. One is restaurants. My understanding, a large restaurant chain like Darden, which has, you know, all the Olive Gardens and Red Lobster, or not Red Lobsters, but Longhorns and whatever in the country, that they've made no limit at all, even though I guess they're now small businesses. And I think, Rebecca, there were a couple other exceptions. I saw a 1,200 employee exception for something.
There
Do you
are.
remember what that was?
I don't remember what they are, but in the SBA rules, and those are the general SBA rules, and I think they've changed them somewhat in the CARE Act to outline other industries, but no, I don't know what they are.
You want to show us that slide now, Rebecca?
I am going to try.
Okay, I'm going to keep going with Chris. Half
Okay.
my income is from rents and half from 1099 contracting. Do I apply for PPP? Will that knock out the 1,200 for an individual?
Well, that was several different questions. First of all, if you make more than $100,000 a year on your tax return, you're not going to get the $1,200, is my understanding. And then, by the way, if you make more than $70,000, I think it's reduced between 70 and 100. So the people over 100 will get no check. The people under 70 will get $1,200, and the people between 70 and 100 will get some prorated amount of that. So that there's no connection between, to my understanding, between any of these programs and the $1,200. That's just a grant that's given to everybody. Then the other question is the same question we've been answering, I think, which is if you mix your 1099 income and your W-2 income, which I do. I mean, I get income from my law firm, both as a W-2 employee, and then I get the profits that come out the other side, if there are any in a particular year. And again, subject to that $100,000 limit, our understanding is you're going to get 100% of that for 80 days.
Okay. All right, Rebecca, you want to go over that slide?
Sure. So when you're calculating payroll, it's not that they just look at your payroll, but they're going to have to look at what's included and what's excluded. And that's part of what the banks are going to have, part of what they're looking for direction on, and part of what they're really concerned about, because it's not what they're used to doing. So the things that we know that are excluded or are, wages or salary for any employee over $100,000. The wages that we talked about, where there's a tax credit allowed under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Compensation to employees whose primary residence is outside of the U.S. And then federal taxes and Social Security taxes at this point we believe are not included, and railroad retirement taxes. If you look over on the left side, it shows, what is included, and it's pretty much everything else.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Heather, can I sell products, furniture, and decor via curbside delivery while or after applying for PPP, EIDL, unemployment? I guess they want to know if they've got a business, if they can act like they're a restaurant and sell out by the side of the road.
Well, the thing that I want to be clear about is there's no requirement under the program that you suffer any economic loss. There's no requirement under the program that you're not in business. So you can both be in business and get this money, is my understanding. Rebecca?
Absolutely. Yes.
Kim asked the question, we use a payroll company. Are they supposed to assist with the withholding tax rebate, or do I apply for that elsewhere?
The withholding, Rebecca, you know about the withholding tax rebate. I don't really know the details
I know that
of that
the
at all.
withholding tax rebate exists. I don't know. I'm assuming your payroll company is going to have to help you get the information, but your CFO or your accountant should be able to help you with that.
Mark has a good question, Rebecca, about the PPP. Where is there a list somewhere that exists of exactly what you need to have ready to take to the bank? Unfortunately,
no. And there probably won't be. And the reason for that is because we don't know until the SOP comes out tomorrow, the banks are not going to know how they have to analyze these loans. So they're not going to know what they're going to require. And what bankers are saying is that even some banks may require different documents because they have to require whatever documents that they feel comfortable looking at. I will tell you that one of the banks that is one of the SBA approved banks was telling people earlier this week that they need their 2019 and 2020 year-to-date monthly profit and loss statement, their 2019 and 2020 year-to-date payroll reports, their state income, payroll, and unemployment insurance findings, and their tax and ID, EIN, and complete ownership information. So those are some of the documents that will likely be required, but I don't think there will ever be, I mean, banks individually may eventually, and hopefully they will, publish what you're going to need to give them. But I don't think there's going to be one that applies everywhere because banks will likely ask for different things.
It's a moving target.
Yeah.
Sean asked this kind of question. If you receive the loan, do you have until June 30th to bring them back, or do you have to bring them back the day the loan is granted or approved?
You have till June 30th.
Thank you. We're going to go about 5 more minutes, folks, so hang in there. We've got a bunch of great questions, but about 90. We'll do the best we can. How does PPP work for seasonal employees? I have an employee who's a full-time teacher, but works for me full-time in the summer and has done so for 15 years.
So if you have an employer who has seasonal employees, the difference is going to be how it's calculated. When your employees are not calculated, they're going to look at the last 12 months. For a seasonal employer, they're going to look at the monthly average cost. They'll use the 12-week period beginning either February 15th or March 1st and ending on June 30th, 2019. So they just look at a different period.
And so Jane asked the question, so PPL will cover payrolls for 2 months, which 2 months, but really it covers payrolls for the last 12 months, correct?
It doesn't, they're not going to give you a loan amount for 12 months. What they're going to do is they'll take you your average over 12 months. You can get, once they have that average, you can get a loan that is equal to 2 months of that average plus 25%. And the 25% will depend upon your expenses for mortgage interest or your expenses for utilities or for rent. And that's how you'll get the extra. And then when the period it will cover is when you get the loan, it's going to cover the next 8 weeks. So in order to be able to get forgiveness, you're going to have to show how you spent that money over the 8 weeks after you got it. And it's going to have to be the qualified ways to get forgiveness.
Gail says, say I've got 4 employees and you get a PPP loan, and then one of the 4 employees takes FMLA leave to care for a spouse with COVID. You pay that person and get by with 3 employees because your loan is based on 4 employees. Am I understanding that correctly? I don't know. That may be a simple question.
It may be, but Steve, here's the question. They're going to have to continue paying that employee anyway, so their salary is not going to go down. Is that correct?
Well, it depends. Yeah, if it's, first of all, if it's a FMLA qualifying event, in other words, they can't work or telework because of the virus related reason. And secondly, remember, I didn't get a chance to get to this earlier, but the paid leave portion of the Coronavirus Response Act only provides, for most employees, only provides 2 weeks of paid leave, or 80 hours. So the rest of it would be unpaid.
And then this is a question, will the bank accept reports direct from QuickBooks, or do I need to provide reports directly from my payroll company? I'm guessing payroll company?
I think that will be up to the bank.
I've got, let's see here. Married and filing separately, whose income will be based off of and whose account will the check be deposited to? I don't know.
Are you talking about the tax refund now?
That's probably, they're probably talking about the $1,200, so we'll pass on that question.
So my understanding is if married filing jointly, again, it's if you make under 140 when filing jointly, they're going to give you the full amount, the $2,400, and then every increment between that and 200,000, they're going to reduce it, and then over 200,000, you're not eligible.
Don asks a fair question. I own a company. I'm a sole proprietor. My husband is my only current employee. I applied 2 days ago for the Eidl. Is this the correct program for me?
What kind of company is it, did you say?
He just says he owns a company. He's a sole proprietor.
Sole proprietors can apply for the PPP, and the PPP will be forgivable if you use the funds properly. So if it were me, I'd want to apply for the PPP. Depending upon what kind of business they run, they may also be able to apply for the Eidl if they have expenses that are not what they're asking for money under the PPP for.
And the Eidl.
Rebecca, is that clear at this point that sole proprietors are going to go through the PPP and not through unemployment compensation? Because that's what I talked about earlier. I don't know that that's clear.
That sole proprietors are, well, it is true that they're saying that sole proprietors can apply. I'm reading directly from the Treasury Department and what they put out. It says starting April 3rd, 2020, small businesses and sole proprietorships can apply for and receive loans to cover a PPP loan.
Okay. So that means that in all likelihood, they won't be eligible then for the unemployment as well. You get one or the other.
I guess you could choose.
Lots of questions, Rebecca, just about this whole timing of the loans. I own 3 sandwich shops in a large office building lobbies from Gary. We had to close due to lack of customers. We laid off all of the employees. If I seek and receive a PPP loan, do I have to pay the employees as soon as the loan funds are received, or can I wait until the customers return? I think your answer was June 30th.
You're going to have to pay the employees during that 8-week period right after you get the loan. That's what they're going to look at, how you spend the money during that 8-week period.
Okay. Well, listen, everyone. Chris, I'm going to ask you if you have any kind of summaries that you want to close the program up, because I know we've kept everybody for a long time tonight, but such good information. We're so appreciative of you and Rebecca and Stephen joining us. Do you have any summary that you want to close with, Chris? I'll ask you first.
Well, I would just say our website, FinneyLawFirm.com, has a very active blog. We have some 800 blog entries at this point of the history of our firm. Lately, we've been posting 2 or 3 updates a day, so people can log in there. Again, I've received during the course of this call a few email addresses, but if you want to be added to our list, email me, chris@FinneyLawFirm.com. And again, we're going to take this another step for people who want to use us professionally. Rebecca, Steve, and I will be glad to help people, and we can talk to people about that. If you want to call, our information is on the PowerPoint. My office number is 513-943-6655, and my cell is 720-2996. Email is best because of the volume of this has been very high the last few days. And I know the bankers are just overwhelmed with this. They're putting auto responses on. So feel free to email me. Feel free to call me on my cell anytime, 720-2996, or text me, and we'll try to respond. We know there are a lot of people who are really good, hardworking Americans who are really hurting right now, who maybe spent their whole life building a business or just as an employee. And there are programs out there to help you, and we're here to help you to access those.
Thank you, Chris. Rebecca, anything you want to close with?
No, I'll just give myself as well, which is 513-703-6227. Again, 513-703-6227. And my email is rebecca@finneylawfirm.com. It's on the end of the
And anybody that loses track of those numbers, just go to empoweruohio.org. They'll be at the bottom of this class, the contact information and phone numbers. Stephen, anything you want to end with?
Yeah, just to echo what Chris said, we've published about a half a dozen blogs so far about the employment law implications of these new acts. So I would urge everyone to visit the Finney Law Firm website. Lots of really good information there about how employment law has changed because of the virus. My direct dial is 943-5678, cell 324-8780. My email address is on the presentation. So would welcome hearing from anybody, and everybody stay safe out there.
So a couple of things I want to summarize with.
And one more thing, Dan, is don't touch your face.
Right? Don't touch your face. I've got something I wanted to add to that situation, if I can bring it up on the screen, that somebody sent me today. You know, humor is kind of important, but I just kind of want to leave you with a couple thoughts, and that is that tomorrow you'll be able to take a look at this class. There'll be a recording of this class done tonight. It'll be online tomorrow, and you'll be able to pull it up on the screen and watch it in case you miss something. And the other thing is, remember, the PowerPoint for tonight is on the Empower You Ohio website. You can download it, you can print it out, you can go over it, review some of your questions, and hopefully they will, they'll help you out. other than that, we're just really glad you could join Empower You tonight for this important session. I'm feeling really a lot of just anxiety and pain for you all, and just feeling what you're going through. And it just seems so unfair, but let's do the best. Let's get through it. We can do this. We hope you'll join us for another session of Empower You, maybe next Thursday night when we interview Pete Whitty from the West Side. It'll be a fun interchange of ideas. And thank you so much for joining us at Empower You. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.